In this lecture, we'll look at a social structural theory of criminology, strain theory, which leads to a more individualistic theory of criminology, general strain theory, later in the 20th century. But we'll go back 120 or so years, and we'll start with Emile Durkheim, a French sociologist who lays the groundwork for this body of criminological theory. Durkheim was a French sociologist, not a criminologist. He developed a concept that is still relevant in sociology called anomie, A-N-O-M-I-E. So you may recall this from Intro to Sociology. So this is a condition of a society where norms are breaking down. So it commonly happens in war situations, post-disaster situations, post-apocalyptic situations. A situation where the normal rules and norms that govern social behavior are breaking down. So keep in mind, this is a condition of a society, not an individual. There is a related concept in sociology called anomia. I'll type that in here, but that's not what we're talking about. Anomia refers to an individual human being's experience of disconnection from the norms of their society. So most of us experience this from time to time. Occasionally we all feel alienated from our culture and our society, and we all feel alienated from the rules from time to time. This is a feature of individuals, anomia. With an anomie, we're talking about a social structural feature of an entire society. Durkheim was also interested in social change. Many of the grand theorists of the 19th century had this conception of before and after, because in the 19th century we see the rise of the Industrial Revolution, which causes radical social change across Western Europe and the northern United States. And the theorists were trying to explain what just happened with this Industrial Revolution. How did life change so much? So you see a lot of before and after theories. And Durkheim fits into that general pattern of 19th century theorists. And he distinguished between two forms of social solidarity. The older form, the before form, he called mechanical solidarity. So this describes what coheres a society. So the term solidarity, he uses the word solidarity to refer to features of society that lead to cohesion. And he argues that in pre-industrial societies, pretty much everybody has the same knowledge, more or less the same skills. There's a minimal division of labor. And it's this commonality that leads them to cohere into a society. You don't need a formal system of governance. You don't need a legal system, because informal social controls are sufficient to keep people in line. In a small village, all you really need is gossip to keep people in line. In worst case scenario, we'll go to ostracization. But there's no need for formal courts of law and prisons and parole and probation and things like that. So that's the before version. Now the after version, after the Industrial Revolution, as we move to larger cities, more complex societies with a division of labor, similarity alone cannot create solidarity, because in an industrial urban area, there is a lot of diversity. People have much more division of labor. In other words, you have specialized jobs. So we all work different jobs. We know different things. We are reliant on each other. I'm reliant on the baker to make my bread. The baker is reliant on the the cobbler to make his shoes, and so forth. So Durkheim calls this situation organic solidarity, where society coheres because we rely on other people to provide for our basic needs. In a small pre-industrial village, we all have the same skills. We can all pretty much engage in the self-sufficiency economy. In an industrial urban urban society, we rely on one another. So we can't rely on commonality anymore. So we rely on each other's because each other providing for each other. So what does that have to do with criminology? Durkheim argued that crime is normal, that all societies will have crime. And the reason he argued that is because he argued that crime is functional. Crime performs important functions for society. He did not mean that we need to tolerate crime. He acknowledged that crime is to be abhorred, but he did not view crime as abnormal. He viewed it as crime as normal, because crime can be found in all times, all historical times, and in all societies. So it's a normal and inevitable social phenomenon. So criminals and other deviants in this perspective are actually socially useful. They perform these functions. So what are the three functions? By punishing deviance, we mark out exactly where the line is between conforming behavior and deviant behavior. So norms are socially constructed, and punishing deviance is the way we socially construct the norms, and how we draw the line between what is okay and what is not okay. So this is the first function of crime, to help us define what we mean by deviant or criminal. The second function of crime is to build solidarity. By punishing deviance, we stress what it means to be a member of the group, and we build solidarity among the group members by collectively holding deviance to account. We are the people who are coming together to say, no, you cannot behave that way. So this is another way of creating solidarity in a complex industrial society. The third function of deviance is that deviance can stimulate social change, and thus helps societies grow and adapt to new circumstances. This happens when formerly deviant behavior becomes redefined as socially acceptable. Now, I'm sure you can all think of examples of that. But I'll throw out one. Martin Luther King was considered a criminal and a deviant in his time because he was engaging in civil disobedience. However, the norms that MLK was advocating for are now today considered acceptable, even desirable. So this is a good example of how deviance, in this case, the civil rights activists of the classical late 1950s, early 1960s period, civil rights activists were considered deviants in their time period, but they stimulated social change that we now see as valuable. Durkheim argued that these three functions are so important that even a society of saints would have deviance. So this is kind of a thought experience. Imagine a society of saints, perfectly formed people. They would have deviance. They would find something to mark out the deviance among their membership, because deviance serves such important functions. As part of this thought experiment, Durkheim asks us, what would happen in the society of saints if society could successfully repress everybody it currently identifies as criminals, deviants? Well, we would just develop sensitivity to new forms of behavior and redefine them as deviant behavior, those new types of behavior. And this could go on almost indefinitely, and we would have to do it because we need deviance to perform these three functions.